Welcome to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. Well, we've been talking about the Kennedy assassination on and off, and it's not digging into some 62-year-old story that is not of no relevance to us. Well, first of all, political assassinations are always relevant because they are the sort of ultimate punctuation mark of political discourse, if you like, even today. And it's also very interesting for our viewers who tend to believe, and as I do, that the world isn't all that it seems, and that the mainstream media don't talk about the whole truth. Some of what they say is true, but not all of it's true. That is not to say that everything that the so-called conspiracy theorists say is true. The truth is somewhere in between. But we have to definitely go beyond the mainstream media and what they report. I mean, they've been saying that JFK was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald as a catechesis in the Bible for 60 years. And if you ever wanted to doubt that the mainstream media tell the truth, then Kennedy sets you off on that long journey of understanding that you have to make up your own mind and seek different sources, and that people in power will lie to protect their interests. And I think that's actually part of democracy, to realize that unfortunately, we're on our own and we have to find the truth. And we can't just trust the powers that be. I know my dad said that when he was young, he's born in the 1930s, he believed everything coming out of the media, coming from politicians. And the JFK assassination was one of those events that set him off on a large journey of skepticism, shared by a lot of people in the Western world. Anyway, it's not only that, it's important for our sort of mental hygiene to look at the JFK assassination, but it's also very interesting because it's in the news at the moment. Trump promised to open up the archives, and there's a congressional committee or several congressmen and women talking about it. And the latest is that a Congress named Mrs. Luna has asked for something that could be determinative for the assassination. And Bart Camp is here to tell us about it. He's been studying the assassination of JFK since the release of the Oliver Stone film. He's collected and shared a humongous amount of evidence during that period. He's released a number of excellent YouTube videos that talk about the theory we're about to explore, the prayer man theory, and you can check it out. He'll give us the links later, but he's also released a number of written papers, and he'll and a book which he'll talk about. Prayer Man, More Than the Fuzzy Picture. You can find it on Amazon and Google Books. An unprecedented, decade-long investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald's last 48 hours. Now, the main thesis advanced by Bart Camp is probably not the originator of the thesis, but he's probably the most famous exponent of it, I think. It's the prayer thesis, as argued by Bart, centers on the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald was not on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository firing shots at President John F. Kennedy during the assassination. Instead, he posits that Oswald was standing on the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository in the doorway at the time of the shooting. This figure, dubbed Prayer Man, due to the appearance of clasped hands and a blurry image, is captured in films by various news photographers and films, I should say, on the day, taking seconds after the shots were fired. Now, well, if it was Lee Harvey Oswald, then you don't have to look at, how many bullets could be fired, all that technical stuff that I've been talking about for weeks, and you can just see for yourself that's Oswald, and he could have been on the 6th floor at the same time. So it's something that even the simplest person can understand. And where are we now with that debate, Bart?
Prayer Man started 16 years ago, roughly, started to take shape, although the discovery of Prayer Man was already done in the 60s. And it was discussed. There was a man in the shadow, is what they call it. And there were 3 researchers who did this. One of them was Harold Weisberg. The other one was Richard Bernabei, who was very good. Started making sketches based on 5th or 6th generation images as such. And Richard E. Sprague. Richard E. Sprague was somebody who was affiliated with the HSCA and who got hold of a copy of the Weekman film and had these films enlarged by duplicating them on 5x4 inch negative, black and white negative. And gradually the film started to come out a little bit more. Robert Groden's, of course, with this film, Assassination films, was a big step up. And then that kind of quality is actually, that was it, the maximum quality. Now with the recent hearings, the good thing, I mean, I thought it was quite a strange event. quite entertaining as well, by the way. But the request is going to be put in by Congresswoman Lana for NBC to hand over the 2 films that I think, show Lee Harvey Oswald on the first lower step of the landing of the front entrance of the Texas School Book Depository. And that's not based on the film just like that because we see something, because that's like the same method as Badge Man, which was happening in the late 70s, early 80s, about behind the picket fence. The thing with Prayer Man is that we have interrogation evidence from Lee Harvey Oswald's first interrogation that states where he was. One of them is the Will Fritz notes. These were, at the top of my head, they were handed over in the end of '96, and these are handwritten notes. Now we don't think that these notes are contemporary, as in like there and then, because Fritz was renowned for not taking notes at all. Back then, Dallas police he was a captain, had another detective sitting in on the room in that interrogation. And then when it came to court, it was just a matter of Will Fritz saying, he did this, he admitted that, he said such and such. And then the detective would just basically, the next one understand and give his say. And yeah, everything he said is correct. So, their words against yours. So we doubt that he took those notes there and then, but he took them shortly after. And then there was an FBI agent by the name of James Hosty, and he was taking notes during that interrogation. And the way I see this is that from the copies from the archives that I've got, it's like a flip book. What detectives had in their inside pocket of their jacket, take it out and open it up and start taking notes as such. Those were his first preliminary notes. But straight after that, he made a report, a pre-report, and he did this while he was taking notes of Oswald's evidence that was laid out, his wallet, the inside of the wallet, the insides, all the cards and what have you not that were there. He was taking notes of the phone numbers of the notebook and so forth. So he does this on a blank block of DPD affidavit paper, because in the mirror writing from the copies, from the Xerox copy, you can see in mirror writing backward from right to left, affidavit in any fact. So we know he wrote it on the back of it. And this is his first proper recollection of that particular interrogation. And that's where Oswald had said that he was outside watching the presidential parade. So this note was overlooked by almost everyone. It was released. It was handed over as part of the Hosty collection with the ARB, and nobody picked up on it. And I found it in 2009 in February while I was working with Malcolm Blunt's archive. And of course, that note was sent a fair little shockwave through the media that day to a few people. And that is basically, in a nutshell, that this is the position of the person that stood there, for which no one says, oh, that's me, or I was standing there in any of the statements of the people that were working at the Texas School Book Depository. It's not a stranger either, because all the Texas School Book Depository employees, at the top of my head, about 74 of them, were asked the question, did you see any strangers? No, didn't. And only one person saw a stranger basically using the restroom 45 minutes prior and saw the person leave with 3 elderly ladies going underneath the underpass. So he was gone before the motorcade came past. So it's that, the statements, you take the process of elimination of what type of individual is standing there. Well, first of all, it's a male Caucasian. So we can take away Hispanic looking people, African Americans, Females, we can take them out as well. Then you look at his dress. This is somebody who's wearing an oversized shirt. Okay. People in the office don't wear an oversized shirt. They wear crisp white shirts and jackets. And so that makes him a laborer. That really quick summation of the power of deduction. You start to conclude and go, this is a worker.
Just to pick up, so basically, the nub of the evidence is you can look at this photograph taken by Darnell, who's an NBC camera. This is still of a video of a video. You didn't have video then, but film, a news clip, newsreel that NBC still hosts, and which now Congress is trying to get released. For some reason, unfathomable reason, NBC have declined to release this. So we've been frustratingly short of the full resolution required to see if it was Oswald or not. But if you look at the picture, you can actually see, although the face is blurred, it looks like Oswald. I mean, it's got his body shape, and it's got his hair shape and hairline. And it said I'll just get it summarized. So it looks like him. And we've got two written notes, one from Will Fritz, handwritten, and one from Hosty, another handwritten thing, which you discovered, saying the Fritz note said that he was out there with Shelley, and he wouldn't have. Shelley was his
in front. Outside, in front with Bill Shelley. That's what he said.
And he wouldn't have known that. I mean, presumably, one counter argument would be, well, Oswald said that without. He was lying, right? So he could have been lying. So those notes on their own are not determinative, but combined with the fact that it looks like Oswald, although there's a blur in the face, those three bits of evidence.
Marina recognized him as well without prompting. Said Italy, just like when we shared some enlargement prints, and we sent them over, and we didn't even ask her, who do you think this is? She just went, yes, hello, blah, yes, Italy. That was it. Boom. She said, also, she's still alive, this is also good. Yes, she is. And she said as well, it's only between him and the other guy. And the other guy, she means Billy Lovelady. You see, when you go through the whole deductive method as such, and going through this, and you can take the women away, you can take the African Americans away and the Hispanic guys away. Then you only have white guys. And then from the white guys, like how many people were actually laborers were working there? And you know what? There was like Jack Doherty, who said he was on the 5th floor. You had Billy Lovelady, who's recognized standing on the stairs, but is walking away from the stairs towards the knoll area, and is seen in the Couch film. And Couch was filming at the same time as Darnell did. They were sitting on the back seat on top of the ledge of the car, and they're on the hood and the back hood, and their cameras are actually going like this. So they capture Marion Baker's run towards the front entrance. Now, Darnell does this, captures it, and then swerves back, whereas Couch swerves back sooner, and he captures Billy Lovelady, which also makes you conclude that it isn't Lovelady, because it started out with the doorway man myth that started on the first day of the assassination already, when people said that picture of James Algens, which was on the front pages of the newspapers, and they basically started like, oh, who's this guy? So then they started looking from the other side, like, oh, somebody shot him from this side, but there's somebody who shot him from that side. I'll
stop you there because we could go into a break. I'll just summarize. I mean, this is the elevator pitch, and then we'll talk about Doorway Man in after the break, because Doorway Man is the alternative candidate that many think was Oswald, and then he proved not to be Oswald, and everyone says, oh, so your whole theory is wrong, but you'll explain that after the break. But what I'll say is basically there's a picture that looks like Oswald. There's two testimonies from two detectives. There's Marina Oswald, his Russian-born wife, who's still alive, but in 83 or 84 years old, living in Dallas, who sent pictures and said, oh, that's Lee. So she recognized him. And then finally, we've got the exclusion method, which is there are a couple of Caucasian laborers working at the Texas School Book Depository, and by a process of exclusion, you can delete all of them. I mean, he obviously wasn't a black face, it wasn't a woman there, it was a white Caucasian, and the only one that remains unidentified is Lee Harvey Oswald. So those are the elevator pitch facts. We'll be back to you after the break. Welcome back to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. We've got Bart Camp with us, and we're talking about the JFK assassination. And to me, as I said, I mean, I used to say that the head jerked back, the JFK film is sort of 1 second evidence that the official story doesn't count because he's obviously shot from the front. Well, the people who said he was Oswald said, come on, that's because of the car was breaking in and then it pulled away again. So his head did seem to be shooting back. So it's all explained. And then I got kind of lost in all the technicalities. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the ones who said that Oswald did it and shot from behind, maybe they're right. But with this latest account, we don't need head jerking to the back when sitting in the car theory, which Oliver Stone uses, and I used to use as the killer fact that Kennedy was killed by conspiracy. It's the fact which Bart Camp has been so successful and assiduous at developing, this idea that Lee Harvey was actually standing in front of the building from which he was officially supposed to be sitting on the 6th floor aiming a rifle. He was actually there when and there's photos that almost show it, although we're still waiting for NBC to produce the high quality footage that would actually resolve this question once and for all. And they've been stalling for 60 years. God knows why. But we might actually have clarity on this in the next couple of weeks. Anyway, we're just talking about all the reasons why it's all the evidence is very clear. But you were just saying, obviously, those who think Oswald did it, they don't want Oswald to be there on the steps of the school book depository when the limousine is going past, because that would exonerate Oswald. So they very quickly came up with this theory of the doorway man. Can you explain that theory?
Doorway man started on the day of the assassination, and it was because the photograph that James Algens took, roughly opposite from where the headshot was happening on the larger patch of grass on the plaza, opposite the knoll, and he shot back. No, sorry, he shot the picture. Yeah, he stood where the headshot happened, but he shot the picture of where Kennedy was shot in the throat. At that point, you can see that Kennedy is grabbing his throat, and that some of the Secret Service agents are looking backwards. But to the left of that was the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository, and you can see a guy leaning out and looking like, going like, what's going on? What's happening over there? And due to the quality of the print in the newspapers, this is a photograph that got developed really quickly and was shared to the national media really quick. Well, quick for those times. And of course, print quality of newspapers wasn't the finest, and a lot of people thought they saw Oswald standing there. And that basically got refuted right away from the same day, because also Billy Lovelady, who is this guy, recognized himself in a large, like table size, like 30 by 40 inches print, and said, yeah, that's me. And our fellow TSBD workers said that as well. Yeah, that's him, such and such. And also then researchers who didn't believe it, what the official story was, started to look like other photographs. And then you can see that it is a Lovelady wearing his checkered shirt. And then further studies then basically enabled us to say, in the Couch movie, he was walking together with Bill Shelley. That then opened a gap in the back left upper corner where there's a man standing in the shadow. And then we get the story like, hey, there's somebody else there. But what does he look like? No, it's too fuzzy. It's too dark. And that's why we actually want to look at the better generations of the film. And if we get the original, we might, with the assistance of some AI, because I'll tell you now, the film itself, I doubt it. It will give the detail that's conclusive. But artificial intelligence with deep blurring could do this. I mean, maybe the technology isn't 100% yet, but I've seen some other things where I'm going, yeah, that's pretty good, and it could help, because also it needs to understand how it was blurred. And I think the camera it's motion blur from the camera by basically swerving it like that. That's also what the blur looks like.
Right, so because this cameraman, this NBC cameraman, he knew that he was witnessing a historic moment. He was just trying to capture everything, and he was moving fast towards the scene of the assassination, and he was just swinging the camera left and right, and so he captured this completely by accident, as it were. Well, so Billy Lovelady was this guy who actually is the most resembling Oswald. He doesn't resemble Oswald, but he's a Caucasian male you know, in his 20s or 30s or something. He could conceivably have been Oswald in a blurred picture. And all the newspapers in the world, you know, people thought, oh, that is Oswald, but he was standing in a slightly different position, and he's wearing a check shirt. And other footage taken on the day showed Lovelady stepping out from that position. We peered around the corner by the doorway to see the Kennedy assassination, you know, the immediate aftermath of the shots. He steps out, and he can be seen walking towards the scene of the crime, you know, in the seconds later, seen from other cameraman. And again, you can see he's got this Irish look about him, you know, Irish face with a curly brown reddish hair or something.
Yeah.
And
Bald
then
patch
this
as well, just recognized.
bald patch, and then a checkered shirt, which is totally different from what the prayer man, i.e. Oswald, is wearing in that footage that Darnell took. So behind, actually, Lovelady, it's a case of mistaken identity. He steps out, and in the real the real Lee Harvey Oswald is actually there, but he wasn't captured in that original photo with Lovelady peering around the corner. And I hope people can make sense of that. So basically, but a lot of the anti
basically support this. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Sorry,
well, you get. Yeah. So basically, this has been used by the Lee Harvey Oswald did it faction to say, oh, it's Billy Lovelady, and that kills all the arguments. And people who don't know better think, well, that maybe it's true then. But you've just refuted it there. We're just going to go to another break, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. We've got Bart Camp with us talking about the Kennedy assassination. And without further ado, we'll talk a little bit more about Billy Lovelady. Sorry, I interrupted you mid-flow there. What were you going to say?
Lovelady and Shelley, according to their statements, left the stairs really quickly. And that is a problem, because later on they refuted that during their Warren Commission testimony and said they were there for 2.5 to 3 minutes standing there. If they'd stood there that long, they would have seen, according to the Warren Commission scenario, that Oswald would have walked out there with his Coke in his hands. And that never happened. You see, there are certain things that make, you know, prayer man is just one thing. We see this as the cherry on top. It's not about, oh, we see this picture and we're going to start fantasizing a nice little scenario. It actually starts with the invention of the second floor lunchroom encounter, when Oswald's being interrogated. In his first interview or interrogation, his alibi is completely destroyed, and he's thrown under a bus. And you see that also if you see the notes, he clearly states that he was standing outside in both those notes. That hardly it's really thinly reflected in the first official report, which is by James Hosty and James Bookhout together. We call it the Bookhout-Hosty report. And that report gets changed completely in tone in 2 days, 48 hours or 72 hours later, where basically the second floor lunchroom encounter has been invented and inserted as such to make Oswald look as the guilty person. And Oswald, ironically, gave him the idea to use information he gave during his first interrogation. And they basically twisted it around.
So it's basically part of your book traces the evolution of his testimony and the crushing of his original story to make it fit. Because obviously, if he's down on when the assassinations happened, and he's down on he could have been an assassin. So, and I think JFK, the JFK film got this wrong. Oliver Stone got it wrong. So this is the most popular version that we all have in our heads. Even though he gets a lot right, he gets this wrong. He said that Lee Harvey Oswald was on the second floor, or was it the first floor in UK parlance, second floor in American parlance,
second floor,
and getting a Coke, and he turned around, and the policeman barging through on his way up to the 6th floor, and the buildings manager say, no, he works here, and then they carried on up. But according to the pro-Oswald faction, they needed to have him there on the 2nd floor in the lunchroom so that he could have barreled down theoretically from the 6th floor and then coolly swipe a Coke and stand there as if innocent. But you're saying that he wasn't there on the 2nd floor. Well, obviously you're saying that because he was actually on the ground floor.
There's so much wrong with it. My first body of work inside this whole thing was called The Anatomy of the Second Floor Lunchroom Encounter. and I wrote the first version was about 80 pages, and it became about 150 pages. This is about an event that was supposed to happen 90 seconds after. And I started reading through all the testimony. I started reading all the interviews, the newspaper articles, the photographs, the size of things, etc., etc. And then basically came to the conclusion it goes impossible. It never happened. And on top of them, when they had to remember things, they messed up. They messed up during the Warren Commission testimony. You see, this is the thing. They got away with this because there was no lawyer present for Oswald in such a state that he would actually vigorously defending what was going on as such, or ask pertinent questions. That just didn't happen, you know. And um, that's where it started with. And you know what? It was the first thing that I read was that I just went, no way. Is that when Roy Truly, the superintendent who allegedly went in with Baker, Marion Baker, and he ran ahead of Baker up the stairs. And I'm going, hold on a minute. What fool goes up the stairs with a copper behind him with a gun drawn and a potential assassin coming down the stairs, and you want to caught that in the you want to caught in the middle of this, right? And that was like, that doesn't make any common sense whatsoever. That's the dumbest stuff I've ever heard. So, and then I just started investigating, and then I found out that he said twice that he was walking behind Baker. And then he made up the whole story that he was going up the stairs and looked back and said, I didn't see Baker anymore. So then I went into the opening, the door opening with they said pneumatic door, but it was just a door closing system, and saw him standing there with Oswald. Okay, let's have a look at the distance that you walk, which is about a second and a half for you to go around the corner on the floor and go straight on the second or the third step and then looking back. And then that door takes 3 to 5 seconds to close. So how did that happen? He gets in there, opens the door, and he pulls it shut really quickly. So technically, that already didn't add up. And then the statements of others and not seeing this, and other people that were standing on the stairs that didn't see them go past them at all. And that created my interest. And I was like, this is the key. This is the thing that both lone nutters and conspiracy theorists both believe in that happened. And I'm going, but when did it happen? And then it happened before lunch because they were going out at a certain time. At 12 o'clock, it was lunch at the Texas School Book Depository, not 12:30 or 12:32. He didn't go up those stairs. The conspiracy
Mm,
theorists think he went up the stairs after the
mm,
shooting to get a Coke. There's no
mm,
evidence of that whatsoever, you
mm,
know? And also, why would he walk all the way around? And people,
mm,
the biggest giveaway was the fact that everybody said they didn't see him.
mm.
I didn't
So
see
the
him. I didn't see him.
conspiracy, both everyone says that he was on the second floor, getting a Coke, and of course the Oswald faction need him to be on the second floor because they can't have him on the ground floor, and it's just about possible to rush down from the sixth floor to the second floor. Although there are many other problems with the evidence, we know that we're not going to go into that. Truly, obviously, and Marion Baker didn't see him on the second floor. Were they convinced to lie before the Warren Commission then and saying that they did see him on the second floor having
No,
a Coke?
this story was concocted from the documents that I've got. This story was concocted while just after Oswald's first interrogation. What happened was that Nate Pinkston was assigned to go to the Texas School Book Depository and started interviewing people. And he
Mm,
took an interview, a statement of Truly. And in this, he mentions the rifles that Oswald mentioned in the first interrogation. Now, take a most likely scenario with a bit of common sense and say, well, that what happened. Oswald says, yeah, I saw rifles a couple of days before this happened. Oh, okay. Hosty knows about this, calls the office. Hey, such and such. You said there were rifles in the office, etc., etc. Okay. Local office, Dallas office calls Nat Pinkston and say, listen, talk to Truly and ask him about this, about these rifles. But then this is where the first entry is made of the second floor lunchroom encounter.
right.
Before that, you look at Baker's statements, it makes no mention of it. He says
Right.
he meets somebody on the third and the fourth floor.
Right. So the policeman Baker and the Roy Truly Buildings manager rushing up. That's in all our imaginations. We all know about. You see that Kennedy film where the doves or whatever flutter, and then there's people heading for this
There were doves
building.
fluttering everywhere.
Exactly. So it's this idea that everyone who knows anything about the Kennedy assassination believe that they barged up to try and catch the assassin before he could escape, and then
Didn't
saw
happen.
Oswald in the lunchroom drinking Coke, cool as a cucumber. Did these two gentlemen, the buildings manager and the Baker, then not say it? It was imputed to them by the detectives in the Dallas police and written down as if true. But did they testify before the Warren Commission and say that they'd been there or not?
They did go up. That's for certain. They've been recognized by other people that they did
Okay,
go up.
they go up, but they just didn't see Oswald there. So that little scenario lasting 5 or 10
they
seconds
met
or something didn't
someone
happen.
up there, which is the third or the fourth floor. Now, if you look at the third floor, there weren't many men, and on the fourth floor, there were 8 and probably 10 women on that floor. No guys. So when they said Baker met somebody, a male that he checked out, there must have been something of seeing someone, checking him out, and going and leaving. The documentation afterwards. So when Baker is interviewed himself by Marvin Johnson, Marvin Johnson makes a terrible report, which is filled with untruths. One of them he says that he frisked Oswald, and he said he also recognized him in the lineup, which didn't happen either. I mean, actually, Baker refuted that during his Warren Commission testimony. But if you start looking at the whole thing, the plausibility, the measurements, the statements, the people that were there, the images, it just didn't happen. And it was just basically because Oswald gave him that idea during that very first interrogation. And you know what? I mean, I blame. It's not Dallas police, but Dallas police was used to doing things like that, locking people up, even though they were innocent. Yeah.
Basically, a
Worst
corrupt
case.
organization, right?
Well, I wouldn't call it corrupt. I'm just saying it's just endemic inside at that whole time, which is just a remnant from the old days, from 30, 40, 50 years before that, even before.
Well, we're going to talk about. We're going to move on to the next stage because a number of contemporaneous newspaper reports actually placed Oswald on the ground floor. That is exactly as we've been positing throughout this interview, but that's been lost in the memory hole once the newspapers got the fix in and started lying to us, as they've been lying to us for 60 years. Back after the break. Welcome back to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. We've got Bart Camp with us, who is the most persuasive proponent of the Lee Harvey Oswald was on the ground floor when the assassination took place. You're saying that second room lunch encounter didn't take place. That's famous from the JFK film. For those of you, if you don't catch every nuance of our discussion here, you don't need to follow you just need to look at the damn photograph when it becomes available from NBC. If it's Oswald, it is Oswald. That's all you need to know. And Oswald wasn't on the 6th floor, and it was a conspiracy. And Lee Harvey was basically a patsy, which is what I've maintained all along. So, Bart, didn't the newspapers because the reporters rushed into the building and tried to grab anyone they could, and just asked them what their instantaneous reactions was, and if they'd seen Oswald. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think there was the Dallas Morning News and the London Free Press and so on.
Ken Biffle was in there, and they probably went in 7 or 10 minutes after the assassination. But the official story is that Oswald left after 2.5 minutes, which is rubbish, because we know that Oswald stayed longer than that, because we have the Revel list. The Revel list is a typed up list of people that had to leave their details at the front door for them to leave. Oswald is on top of that entire list. And other than that, this is a very interesting list, because some individuals in that group of the Texas School Book Depository employees that were there at that point inside the building and wanted to get out, they had actually intelligence files on them. So they were being watched or seen as a subversive of some sort or troublemaker. Oswald is on the top of that list. This is a typed up list after people had a clipboard and were basically taking notes. These coppers are both photographed in front of the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository. This is all happening like 1:45. On that list are also people that were not signed out, people that didn't come back. Yeah, there was quite a handful of people that were not allowed back in. So they just went, look, nothing's happening. Police is cordoning it off. We're not going to try to get back in as such. So the whole missing persons thing is already really questionable right away from the word get go. And that list is basically showing that Oswald left later. And then you get Roger Craig. Now, Roger Craig was a young sheriff, and he worked for Bill Decker. And I think he was awarded the year before that, promising detective, something like that. And he says he notices Oswald coming over the hill and getting into a Nash Rambler that was driven by a Latin American looking guy. Okay. Then there are two others who also do this. They also see a guy who looks like Oswald coming down those and getting in that car. That by itself puts massive strain on the scenario that's been done with him being at Beckley, where the car comes outside and honks the horn, and where he goes to the Texas to shoot Tippett on 10th and Patton, and then basically makes his way to the Texas Theater. My speculation on this point is that he was nowhere close to the Texas to 10th and Patton. He was basically close to where the Texas Theater was, where he got dropped off, and he was told to meet somebody. But that's my part of the speculation.
So just to keep it simple, in the Washington Post on the 23rd of November, Police Chief Jesse Curry said, as an officer rushed into the building, Oswald rushed out. The policeman permitted him to pass after the building's manager told a policeman Oswald was an employee. The Sydney Morning Herald of the 24th of November states that the policeman stopped a man inside the door who told the policeman, I work here. The paper adds, another employee confirmed that he did. The policeman let Oswald walk away. And then there's an interview with Orcus Campbell, who's the kind of manager of the whole building, vice president. Yeah, vice president, who said he'd been standing on the doorstep shortly after the shooting. He told the New York Herald Tribune, we raced back into the building. We stood outside watching the parade. We saw Oswald in the small storage room on the first floor, ground floor in UK parlance. Then he noticed he was gone. So these early newspapers suggest that they reported that Oswald was kind of hanging around in the doorway inside, not on the steps, as happened on the actual assassination, as the photo will prove to us, but he just kind of scooted in and was hanging around inside, perhaps in this little storage room just to the left of the entrance. So again, evidence that he was not far away from the assassination crow's nest or whatever on the 6th floor, but was basically hanging around in that area. Those early reports have been memory holed, but they suggest that maybe Baker and Truly met him on the ground floor before rushing ahead.
That's possible. That they met him at the entrance.
Yeah.
On that part, there are theories, but one thing is for certain: all of us, from the evidence, concluded it didn't happen on the 2nd floor. It happened near the entrance of the 1st floor. And their remarks were made that day when it comes to the actual encounter that were never repeated the next day. Right away after that. You got to see all these hungry reporters talking to anyone and finding things out and just taking quote after quote and just dotting it all down. It's not like these days where everything is recorded. And, there were no portable records. Well, they were about as big as a big suitcase. So you have to accept that it's all cluttered and all squashed together because they're just trying to get all the reactions in. And we were lucky that some people uttered words of, hey, there's this, and they've seen him there. Because you know what? That finds its way back into the documentation. Because in the documentation of the people that are supporting or the second floor lunchroom encounter, they say when they got to the hallway, they saw no one there. Why are you saying you saw no one there? That's just so odd. It's just so off. Why? No, we went in. Oh, right. Did you see it? No, we saw no one there. And it's like, why will you ask that question? And that's because other people beforehand said, hey, Oswald was over there. He was there in the landing. He was standing near the glass doors of the front entrance of the Texas
But
School Book
inside rather than
Depository.
outside. Can I just we just go on to a final subject because we've got 7 minutes left. The biggest skepticism, the biggest killer argument against you guys from the Oswald faction is that they say, but none, I mean, there were people, all these people of the Texas School Book Depository, employees, laborers, accountants, secretaries, I don't know, 10 or 12 people you can see from the photograph. None of them said they recognized Oswald. So
I can explain that.
why did they not do that? Over to you.
First of all, it's the 60s. Now, we know what the South was like in the 60s. We all know that. We've all seen the history, we've seen the movies, and so forth. There are still remnants of that there now. But back then, the Jim Crow laws weren't really abandoned fully at that time yet. So that whole way of thinking of how to treat your fellow human being, that went for the same thing for Hispanics. So let's look on the stairs. So we've got Roy Edward Lewis standing in the door opening behind Bill Frazier, black guy. Then we've got another black guy standing on the bottom there, Carl Edward Jones on the bottom stairs. So that's two. Then we've got a guy called Joe Molina, who practically stood right next to Buell Frazier and could have seen Oswald, and was Hispanic. And his house got tossed the same night. He was called in the next day, had to spend 8 hours at the police station, was interviewed twice. One of these interviews was just disappeared for quite a long time, wasn't even typed up. And then what did he say in that interview? Roy truly walked in alone, not with Baker. He walked in alone. So, all right, fine, fair enough. So that's three people already. Then you've got women. So out of all the other people that are on there, there's all these women. What you know this guy how long? 4 weeks, 6 weeks? You saw him sporadically come around, maybe get some change for a bottle of Coke. Then you get arrested for being a cop killer. In those days, being a cop killer, I mean, who's going to side with that? Or who's going to say, oh, yeah, I knew him? Because they know they're in the interrogation room next. And that's Joe Molina. Joe Molina was also seen as a subversive because of the American GI Forum. The American GI Forum was, if I recall correctly, set up to create equal burial rights for Hispanic veterans out of Second World War. That was regarded as a subversive organization that was going to be infiltrated by communists, and that was basically infiltrated by FBI informants who informed about Molina. When Molina was basically approached about all this, he'd already left it a year and a half ago. He wasn't even the chairman anymore. Now, there's all these people that have all been pressured and so forth. And you know what? I don't blame them. Bill Frazier these days, I don't blame him either. Why? Why do you need that headache that late of being called a liar or basically, whatever, and kept it
Right.
quiet? Well, I'm not surprised because of the DPD, the
Right.
amount of
So
force and
basically,
pressure.
several of them probably did see Oswald. I mean, although he was standing at the back in the shadows, but some of them might conceivably have seen him. But when they asked, when he'd been arrested and he shot a cop allegedly in another place in Dallas, we won't go into that detail, but that was part of the story, of the official story. And then it was all over the evening news, the biggest story of the century. And they had information that could have exonerated him, but the pressure was so big from the Dallas police and everyone that they didn't want to talk. They didn't want to get involved, basically. And that's where we are today. But the basic argument is obviously he looks like Oswald. And then the fact that by exclusion, I mean, one of the arguments I saw is that this guy is standing there as if he belongs to the crowd, works in the building, right? Because he's standing slightly to the back. How likely is it that everyone else is accounted for, by photographic identification as having worked for the Texas School Book Depository, except Oswald, and the guy who isn't identified from that doorstep happens to look like Oswald, so it probably is Oswald. But how likely is it someone who looks a bit like Oswald walks in from the street, places himself at the back of this tight crowd of people and a stranger, let's say a pedestrian, someone who works elsewhere in Dallas, to decide and watch this parade? I mean, that's not a normal thing. A normal person wouldn't do that, would it? Because you could see there's a crowd of people who know each other.
Unnatural.
And you wouldn't. Exactly. It's unnatural. You don't go and stand there and squeeze through and stand behind there.
Everybody would have noticed you.
Exactly. And then they would have noticed. They would have said there was a stranger there, but they didn't. So silence spoke volumes there, because they didn't recognize this Oswald, who is Oswald, but they didn't say who else it could have been. And they would have said that if it was, let's say, Joe Bloggs, who just walked along and decided to stand behind and watch the parade in this tightly knit group of employees working for the building in whose entrance they were standing. Basically, that's the argument, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? If you just take it all into consideration, the statements, the deduction, the pictures, we're not far off. You know what? Like I said, de-blurring the film on a high resolution is going to be the cherry on top.
Just a last question then. I mean, you're a photographer by trade, and I could tell you're a very, very visual person, a man who sort of notices everything. How can AI help solve this issue? Because AI is very much in the
technology is there to de-blur. I mean, in Photoshop, you can already de-blur. So it all works with an algorithm. And this artificial intelligence, some people basically focus on de-blurring. And that, you know what, it's something that's been going on for a few years, 10 or so, and it's made progress. But you know what, for us to even consider trying to do that, we need high-res scans and start with that, you know. But first we got to get the film. Then it's got to come to archives. Then loads of people want a copy of it. And then, you know, I'm going to talk to some people who are,
okay.
You know, I would like to.
Congresswoman Luna. I mean, so we're all on tenterhooks now, because the mystery could be solved within the next 2 weeks, and then there'll be millions of people who've been up. Could be.
It'll take longer.
And then either you guys will be proved wrong or be proved right, and then a lot of egg on other people's faces. Either way, it's a very exciting moment. Bart, where can we find your stuff? Because you make the case beautifully in some of your YouTube videos and in your book.
Thank you. So I am on prayer-man.com, prayer-man.com. My book is there. You can order it from Amazon, Google Books, and my website's filled to the brim with documentation, research, articles, movies, videos. And once you click on one of the videos, you see my channel, where you can also witness a lot of interesting talks with Malcolm Blunt. So there's plenty to go for. Yeah.
And I said the first port of call ought to be the video where you explain, because it's incredibly helpful to have the picture of Prayer Man and the scene, the moving actors moving in and out. We're done. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Yep. I would suggest to go search YouTube and say Lancer 2023 presentation, Prayer Man.
Lancer 2023, because that's your latest take on the case. Well, that's great. Yes. Thank you so much, Bart Kennedy.
Thank you for having me.
Assassination investigator who might have the clue to the whole thing, the key to the whole thing. Thank you very much. This is Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. Back tomorrow.